Welcome on board the Richplanet starship, broadcasting from somewhere high above the Earth. I'm Richard D. Hall, and we've been reliably informed by viewers of Edge Media Television that in certain households, when people switch Edge Media Television on, a member of the household will walk out of the room in disgust. This presumably is because they can't handle the truth. Now, at the Richplanet starship, we've come up with a solution for this. Good evening. Every week at the beginning of the 6 o'clock news, we'll be hearing from our special new correspondent, Richard D. Hall, who has been tasked by BBC bosses to break all BBC news traditions and report the absolute truth with no spin. Over to you, Richard. Thank you, George. The much-hyped first ever election leadership debate was screened on the 15th of April. The atmosphere in the studio was most peculiar, as the audience had clearly been hand-picked and then told not to speak, react, or ask questions. The three leaders demonstrated in their debate that there is now no alternative party. They broadly agree on almost everything. Why is there no party or person telling them that the war on terror is bogus and has been created by a series of false flag events carried out by our own intelligence agencies, including 9/11 and 7/7, that the occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan are illegal under international law, that the Trident nuclear program is illegal under international law, that the immigration problem is to a degree exaggerated by the media in order to maintain fear of Islam so that the public continues to support the illegal occupations, that the financial crisis and economic boom and bust cycle could be easily solved by simply removing the Bank of England and ending the issuance of currency as debt, then allowing the government to issue its own currency, thus removing the richest families in the world who have cajoled themselves into owning the Bank of England and Federal Reserve, which then enslave the population in an economic prison without bars. And that there is a move by globalists who operate above government to remove sovereign nations by stealth and create a single world government behind our backs. Where was the candidate with these views? We reported 2 weeks ago about the case of Holly Greig, a Down syndrome lady aged 30 who suffered sexual abuse from her father and a paedophile ring based in Aberdeen. The abuse started in 1986 and continued until the year 2000. Greig has named 14 of her abusers, who include a Scottish sheriff called Graham Buchanan, a high-ranking police officer, now deceased, and social workers, and several others. The Scottish legal system, under the direction of Lord Advocate Elish Angelini, is providing protection of this paedophile ring. Robert Green, who was campaigning for perpetrators of Holly Greig's abuse to be brought to justice, was arrested in February. He was headed to Aberdeen city centre to hand out leaflets to the public and was arrested on a charge of breach of the peace and subsequently held for 3 days. Robert Green was arrested again last week on the Thursday the 15th of April and released on bail a second time, we believe for breaching his bail conditions, which state that he should not talk to the media about the case. The police stations dealing with his arrest and detention received a stream of phone calls from the public protesting at the police's draconian behaviour. To find out more about this disturbing case, which goes to the highest levels of our government, please Google Holly Greig and spread the information to friends and family, as the mainstream news media have been censored from covering the story. On the 15th of April, Barack Obama announced to a small audience, "By the mid-2030s, I believe we can send humans to orbit Mars and return them safely to Earth. And a landing on Mars will follow, and I expect to be around to see it." This comes just a few weeks after cancelling future missions to the Moon. In addition to budgets for the Space Shuttle, International Space Station, and other publicly known projects by NASA, there is a secret project, or a secret budget, known as the Black Budget, consisting of trillions of dollars, raised outside of Congress in a variety of nefarious ways. This means that what NASA allow the public to see is only window dressing for a much bigger and more advanced clandestine program to dominate and weaponize space. When Gary McKinnon accessed NASA computers in 2002, he found a list of officers' names under the heading Non-Terrestrial Officers that included fleet-to-fleet transfers and a list of ship names that were not US Navy ships. McKinnon believes that the ships and personnel files he saw were from a space program that operates off-planet spaceships and maintains several secret space stations. What adds weight to McKinnon's claims is what the late Ben Rich said. Rich was the second director of Lockheed's Skunk Works, who developed America's secret aircraft. In 1993, he said, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do." Obama's announcement about missions to Mars and the dog and pony show which will follow is nothing but a diversion from the secret space program in order to keep the public in the dark. It's time to introduce this week's guest onto the show. He is a researcher of UK military bases. His website, secretbases.co.uk, contains a vast compilation of aerial photography and research into the military and intelligence agencies. So without further ado, let's activate the teleporter and get him beamed up onto the ship. Alan Turnbull.
Oh.
Welcome on the Starship, Alan.
Thank you, Richard.
Are you well?
I'm not too bad. It's a marvellous way to get up here. Avoided the volcanic ash.
Absolutely. Okay, Alan, we're here to talk about your fantastic website, which I've spent hours and hours on, I have to say, because there's a phenomenal amount of information on there. Could you start by telling us just how you got into creating this website?
Well, it started back in 2003. It was that year that I became first connected up to the internet by broadband, and as you know, many customers on broadband get free web space with their connection. That happened to me, and I thought I'd already had lots of interest in the media and particularly interest in secret locations, but in my case it was television locations at that time.
Okay.
But I moved on to interest in aerial photography and mapping. I've always had an interest in mapping. So I married those things together and decided to do a website based upon anomalies that I'd found between Ordnance Survey maps and the emerging technology of aerial photographs.
Okay. And one of the things that you looked into in the early days was the Faslane Coulport Naval Base, I believe.
Yeah,
we have an image here of Ordnance Survey.
Well, if you look at that comparison of two versions of Ordnance Survey mapping, it's one of them actually appears like an empty hillside, whereas the other one looks a hive of activity, and there's plenty of things going on in the middle there.
Right.
But that reveals that for decades, Ordnance Survey had a policy of removing sensitive sites from their mapping and replacing them just with apparent empty either farmers' fields or hillsides. Now that policy, it was a government policy, and Ordnance Survey is essentially a government agency. The policy originated in the 1960s, although it was actually a throwback to the days of Winston Churchill in the war. But an MI5 Director General, Sir Martin Furnivall-Jones, in the 60s, introduced a formal policy of instructing Ordnance Survey to remove anything that could be considered slightly sensitive, whether it be something obvious like a nuclear weapons area, or something as straightforward as a nuclear power station. And that policy was in place all through the Cold War, obviously, as you would expect, right up until 2006, when it was suddenly dropped on the quiet.
Right.
And it transpired that my website had a small part in that change of government policy, purely because I highlighted on the website all these anomalies and the futility.
Yeah, because as it was publicly available, you know, the information about what is there is publicly available. And I think you mentioned that the KGB had detailed maps.
Yeah, I mean, moreover, the huge irony, even more so, is the fact that all throughout the Cold War, all that period that we're talking about, 60s, 70s, 80s, the KGB in the old Soviet Union were busy compiling maps that were as good as, in some cases, technically better, more detailed than Ordnance Survey.
So the internet and your website gave rise to the fact that they started putting these things back on Ordnance Survey maps because it was pointless trying to cover them up.
Yeah, the actual government policy changed in 2006, and since around about that time, Ordnance Survey has been on a rolling programme of updates, and lots of these secret bases have been reintroduced.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at some images from your website, Alan. So tell us about this next image here.
Okay, that carries on the theme of the Coolport base, where you have images on the left and right at the top there of the map, which has a suspicious blank space over the left side, whereas you compare it with the right-hand image, which is obviously the aerial photography. That shows something of great interest in that apparent blank space.
There's definitely something there.
Yeah, and that's actually an old nuclear weapons store.
Okay. Okay, and moving on, what do we have here?
Well, the marvellous irony of this is that my website, being about secret bases, is in fact hosted in a data server centre, which is in itself an old secret base, and that's the old USAF nuclear command and control bunker at Greenham Common, which is one of the most famous secret bases in the world.
We've only got time to go through a few of the images on your site, and there are thousands of images on your site, Alan. It's phenomenal. And if anyone who wants to learn about secret or military bases, because the fact that they're there isn't secret, is it? But perhaps what goes on in them might be secret.
Exactly, that's precisely the case. The government will say, and he's quite right, there aren't any secret bases in the UK, because how would you keep them secret? We're in the case of America, massive land space, it's quite easy to squirrel things away underground and they'll not be discovered for decades, whereas you don't have difficulty doing that in this country. But as you say, everything that goes on in our military bases and government laboratories is covered by the Official Secrets Act.
And we'll maybe come on to underground bases in part 3, Alan, but what image do we have here? What significance is that?
Well, that is an MI5 vehicle maintenance depot, which your viewers may be surprised that we're showing a picture of that, but if you show the next image, you'll see that it's no longer there, because it's in the last year or so it's been demolished because it was abandoned, and MI5 have moved their operations to somewhere else in the southeast of England.
Okay, right. And there was a case with was this involving the Google mapping car, or was that later on, Alan?
No, this image we're looking at now is
this one?
That's an implementation. What I've used the technology of Google Maps as it's emerged to create an instance of Google Maps within my website.
Okay.
And that maps out for you there all the key notes of interest around the town of Corsham, which is, if you type Corsham secrets into Google, for example, you get lots of results. It's a very important base for the UK government.
Okay. So what do all of these red marks represent on this map?
Those are actual marks of identification of particular features that can be seen on aerial photographs. Right. And possibly the most famous one out there is the so-called Corsham Computer Centre, which makes it sound like a sort of PC world of the West Country. But as I reveal the next document we're looking at there is actually, again, it's a publicly available document, and that's the Corsham Master Plan, which is the next generation of military facilities in the town.
And what would you hazard goes on here then, at that base?
That is actually just a reworking, a regeneration of the facilities that have been there for decades. and it consolidates various military bases around the Corsham area onto one site, the Basil Hill Barracks.
Okay. Right, well, we're going to go for a short break now, Alan, but before we do, I'm just going to put this particular image up and just ask people to wonder what on earth this jet aircraft was doing in the middle of a forest. Find out after the break.
The Richplanet Starship is sponsored by Geared4.com online bikes, clothing and accessories.
Welcome back on board the Starship, and we're talking with Alan Turnbull, who's an expert on UK military bases, or a researcher of UK military bases. And we were talking about before the break, Alan, about this particular image here, where it seems to show a jet aircraft without a runway in the middle of a forest.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
That's been available on various aerial photography imagery for several years now. And lots of people have thought that it may be a kind of fire trainer facility that you see at places like Manchester International Airport and Heathrow. It's very similar in construction to those, but it's not actually. It's in reality, if I told you the county that it's in, it's Herefordshire.
Okay.
And that should start alarm bells ringing. It is indeed an SAS Special Forces facility for the training in counter-terrorism operations, such as hostage rescue.
Right. So how would that thing? Could that thing just take off vertically then? Is it? Not,
I certainly hope not. No.
So how does it got there?
Presumably it was brought in on a very large lorry,
Right.
or either that or it was probably brought in pieces and assembled on site. Because I think.
So what's the point of having it there if it can't ever take off then? Or
It's just used for training scenarios, so
Right.
that the SAS troops will practice storming it, for example,
oh, right. Okay.
and releasing hostages.
Right.
And there's some.
As they do. Yeah.
Yes. Well.
Yes. Okay. We're moving on. We'll look at some more images. That's a pretty uninteresting image. Alan, tell us the significance of this one.
Yeah. The Street View camera people were out on their travels in.
This is Google mapping you're talking about,
Yeah,
where you can actually
not
just look from the Earth. You can go down and actually wander around the streets.
And of course, only a matter of a month or so ago, it went live for most of the UK, which was a major step forward. This image apparently shows just a couple of boring old buildings with a barbed wire fence. But if you look closely at the sign on the fence, it says something like, "This is a prohibited place within the meaning of the Official Secrets Act.
Right.
No photography, no loitering, no sketching, drawing."
Yeah.
And there we have the Google Street View car going past saying, "Smile, you're on candid camera."
Right. Okay.
And that image has actually been withdrawn from Google, even though it doesn't actually show anything incriminating. You can't see any.
So what is this facility?
It's actually the Special Boat Service, their depot, their facilities depot in Poole Harbour in Dorset.
Right.
And that whole street, and there are just either side of that image, there are just residential streets, bungalows, holiday homes, and that whole street has been removed from
And
Google
this
Street
next
View.
image?
That's a place called Hanslope Park, which sounds like a nice country retreat, and indeed that's how it started off, as a manor house.
Right.
It's steeped in history. It dates back to the early days of MI6, and it's actually formally known as Her Majesty's Government Communications Centre.
Okay.
And it's where, I suppose you could say at a stretch, it's where James Bond gadgets are manufactured.
All right. Yeah.
But,
Pay attention, 007.
it's,
all that.
in that sort of sense, it's stretching a point, but certainly it's unique in that the facilities on site allow for manufacture of PCBs, other devices, all through to major end user.
Okay.
And who those end users are is up
Little
to
gas
speculation.
canisters that allow you to breathe underwater for 3 minutes.
Or, handy Rolex watches.
The dot. Yep. Okay. And this one. GCHQ Edge Hills Test Facility.
Well, that's one of the more recent research exclusives on my website, in that, again, we're dealing with public domain information there, but that is in the middle of the Forest of Dean, a very famous tourist destination in Gloucestershire. It's actually a test range.
So it looks like a huge golf ball on top of a Meccano tower.
Yeah, it's actually two towers, north and south, situated so many metres apart in the middle of a clearing. They've actually got the Forestry Commission to clear the particular area of the forest. And those two towers are situated apart, and they're actually in direct line of sight with the GCHQ Donut back in Cheltenham.
Oh, yes, yes. Yep.
And that's why that particular location was chosen. However, it wasn't the first location chosen. The original one was over in Birdlip, which is another famous Cotswold tourist area.
Right.
But it's also famous for having a ginormous lattice tower on top of the hill there.
Right.
That dates back to World War II era, the RAF. But
so what does this tower do, Alan?
well,
What's it for?
the two towers together, they're used to test equipment that GCHQ are actually shipping out to armed forces overseas.
So
the precise details of that.
does it generate radio waves, or I presume it looks like it does?
It's
Is it like an EM testing thing, or you yeah. Okay.
I mean, the precise details are classified, and by definition, I don't know the precise details. But you can surmise that it's some kind of telecoms equipment. It's obviously not. It's not a laser weapon or anything like that. You can.
But you maybe wouldn't want to stand next to it for too long, perhaps.
Well, actually, the people who live in a cottage right in the forest raised objections to the planning application, and they were placated by the people from the ministry who said that, look, we have to stick by the rigid telecoms guidelines, and you can rest assured it's quite safe.
Interesting. And this document here, Alan, what have we got here?
Well, the most recent exclusive I did for one of the major newspapers was the revelation that the new e-borders system, the electronic borders, running through a database system where everyone is checked going in and out of the country. A secret document, and by secret I mean it was commercially sensitive rather than classified. This document came up in a Google search, whereas it was really meant to be hidden behind a members only area in an aircraft industry website. And it actually revealed that the Queen herself is going to be subject to these e-borders checks. So there's no more waving through Her Majesty saying no need for documents, madam.
Right. And this next one?
Well, this next one is the e-borders database centre used to be centred at Heathrow Airport or on an industrial estate nearby. And then last year it was moved up to Manchester, next to Manchester Airport, although the precise location was kept secret. However, the e-borders' own official website gave tiny clues as to its real location. And I used those tiny clues given in that picture there. They may seem minute, but I used...
So from that picture you could possibly tell where the thing is?
Well, I did, yeah. I used my little tricks of the trade. Which I'm not revealing completely.
There's not a lot to go on, is there?
There's not a lot to go on, and that's where my research magic came in. And I used that image alone, and admittedly a bit of local knowledge, because I live in the Manchester area, to actually reveal that the building that they'd acquired for this National Border Targeting Centre is in fact on an industrial estate near Manchester Airport.
And just to say that Alan has actually done a few little bits and pieces of research for things that I've been involved with in the past, but we'll mention them at another time, perhaps when
we've had a few drinks.
Okay, right. And this next one, Alan, Maple House.
Well, that is in fact that's the document that I managed to find, again freely available on the internet. I didn't have to hang around any dodgy pubs in southeast London to acquire that document. Although
you know.
It's always an option, but that was freely available on the internet, and it shows the particular building that I established was in fact the National Border Targeting Centre. Right. The great irony, and there it is in its full glory.
Okay.
Now the fact is that there's another great irony, that I contacted a senior journalist at ITN, and he said, "Oh yeah, we know about that because we were invited by the Home Office down to bring our cameras to." And they were actually told to film here, do a piece to camera, but you know, keep it quiet, chaps.
Right. Okay. And we're going to talk after the break about a couple of stories that you've been involved with that hit the national press. I mean, just to touch basically on the secrecy element, just to reiterate, it's not. You seem to have collated this massive amount of information, which is not secret in itself, but you would be hard pressed to find that information in one place on the net. I think your site is probably the only repository of such a vast amount of this information.
Lots of visitors to the website, they sort of fall into two camps generally.
Right.
The people who get it and people who don't really get it.
Right.
The people who get it are actually entertained by the spectacle of what they find there, and they can learn from the research techniques that I describe, that involve fairly obvious things, but sort of subtle things like
IP addresses and things like that.
Yes, I even go into avenues like that. But other people expect the website to perhaps be a stark list of, in alphabetical order, of supposed secret military bases in Britain.
Okay.
Whereas what I've actually used the website to do is to actually illustrate research techniques that can be used by anyone, and actually promote myself as a technical researcher.
Okay then, Alan. Well, we're going to introduce the artist of the week. We'll come back and talk more in part 3. And this week, we're featuring Martin Stevenson and the Torags. Now, this song is all about the very strange remote village in northern Scotland called Barbourville.
Heed this advice for all that it's worth. Steer clear of the village on the Cromony Firth named Barbourville. Up the road from Jemimaville, round the corner from Little Tedville, through the square Windowville. Take a trip to Barbourville. Its restless presence you'll instill. There's a weird shine from the side of the road, and a peering llama from a field of gold in Barbourville. The abandoned cycle with its wheel spinning round, radiation stained, smoke on the ground. Get out your car or you'll be gone in a flash. There's a naked civil servant there looking for cash. Barbourville! Barbourville. Weird screams and then a yell in the middle of the night. And then the music stops and everything's still, and it starts again of its own free will. Barbourville and Barbourville, hitchhiker's fingers on the windowsills in Barbourville, in Barbourville, Barbourville. There's people gone missing, but no one's been killed yet. In Barbourville, in Barbourville. The villagers look just like a net would cast. Don't get out your car or you'll be gone in a flash, though. House with the gnomes lets out a strange kind of humming. Captain Boomcock sits there banging his drum in Barberville. Barberville. Weird screams and then a yell in the middle of the night. And then the music stops and everything's still, and it starts again of its own free will. He jacked his fingers on the windowsill in Barberville, in Barberville, in Barberville, Barberville. People going missing, but no one's been killed yet in Barberville, in Barberville. Heed this advice for all that it's worth. Steer clear of the village on the Cromedy Firth named Barberville.
The Rich Planet Starship is sponsored by Geared4.com online bikes, clothing and accessories.
Welcome back on board the Starship, and we are joined by the Starship pet, Ulysses. Okay, it's time again for the interesting person of the week, and we've got Sam Wright again, who runs the Probe UFO and Paranormal Conference in Blackpool, and he's talking here about what happened after the Kennedy assassination.
A chap named Bill Holden, who worked for Air Force One, he came over about 14 years ago, and he spoke on the Kennedy assassination because he worked under 5 presidents. And when Kennedy was assassinated, when Nick Johnson was being sworn in on the plane, the coffin was brought back onto the plane. They took off, and they'd only been in flight for about 30 minutes when the top security man said there was a fault with one of the engines. The plane landed, and he, being the top bloke as a sergeant in security, he was told to go to the cargo area, and the coffin was taken off, and another coffin was brought back on its place. And they only found out days later that in that coffin there were only stones. So when that funeral was taking place with millions of people watching, and the coffin was being lowered, there was no body in that coffin, just stones.
Very interesting, I think you'll agree. Okay, which brings us to the interesting sign. There's somebody at the airlock, just one minute. Hope you've behaved yourself. Yes, the interesting scientific fact of the week is a thimbleful of a neutron star would weigh over, if you could get a thimbleful of a neutron star, it would weigh over 100 million tons. And we're talking with Alan Turnbull, who is an expert on UK military bases. Now, I'm interested in, because you get quite a lot of sensitive information but through your research. Say you get something that you think is really hot. What do you do to, do you just put it on the site, or do you, have you got a means of checking things?
That would be clearly irresponsible. Essentially what I do is the same as any journalist down in London does. If I come into an area of research that highlights something quite important, dangerous, whatever you want, I'll run it by what's known as the D-Notice Committee, but more properly, it's the Defence Press and Broadcasting Advisory Committee, which is a bit of a mouthful. Most people still refer to it as the D-Notice Committee.
Okay.
And it's simply the liaison between the Ministry of Defence, government, and all the security
And is there
services.
an email address that you send it to, or do you ring them? Or
It's
how
normally
does-
by telephone, but
telephone?
yeah, there is an email address
Okay.
as well. And in fact, on very few occasions I've had to do so.
Right.
I once, for example, ran a particular image past the D-Notice Committee that I'd actually annotated with a graphic and a description, and they said, well, we'd rather you didn't include that particular graphic, but we're okay with the rest of it.
Right, okay.
Obviously, I can't go into details of what that image was, but
Okay.
and at no stage has the D-Notice Committee ever approached me and said,
Yeah.
oh, you must...
Yeah, I think that's probably
Delete-
the way that I would prefer to do it. Wait for them to come
Yeah.
to me, you know, because I'm not as, shall we say, what's the word I'm looking for?
Reckless?
Yeah, I'm probably a bit more reckless. I don't know if that's the word.
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of the information that I uncover and I find, I don't really care if it's sensitive, because I believe it needs to be told. Because I think you have a different view of the intelligence agencies in general to what I do. That I think they are, to a degree, doing things that they shouldn't. Let's just leave it at that. And you perhaps don't share that view.
Well, I mean, it's not. It's just that us two, we're totally different animals, really, because you're interested in a particular alternative, you know,
non-official versions of.
Whereas I'm just carrying on what essentially any other journalist does, and that is investigative work, research.
Which brings us nicely, Alan, to the head of MI6. And you were.
I was waiting for that subject to come up. Yeah.
Yeah, you were involved in discovering his Facebook account. Is that? Tell us about that, Alan.
I'll just need to take a sip of water. Yeah. I mean, there was a big hullabaloo about that in summer last year, and it was a scoop. I managed to get a world scoop, and as everyone remembers, it went right around the world. There was pictures of the new MI6 boss in his Speedos on the beach somewhere.
Okay.
And
we're not that kind of show, so I'm not going to show that image or any of the other images that were revealed of his wife and his daughter. You know, but tell us about
Well, it was simply that I through my research magic, found a way into the world of the MI6 chief, and it was simply because his wife had not posted anything damaging. It was just that the fact that she'd not put the correct privacy settings on
the
Facebook account. As simple as that. And that's a lesson to everyone who uses Facebook and every other website out there. That you've got to get the privacy settings.
If you don't want the whole world to see it, you can need to set
I mean,
the
there was no malice intended. I was just after a research exclusive.
I mean, some people might say that even if you have got your privacy settings set on Facebook, the people who own Facebook actually can dabble into your personal information.
They can,
But so you then gave that story to, was it the Daily Mail?
It was the Mail on Sunday, and that was their. It was actually nominated for Scoop of the Year in the Press Awards. It lost out to the huge story of the year, which was the MP's expenses.
Okay.
But
so this is the head of MI6 running around the beach with his trunks on, and we're not supposed to know the identity of this guy. Is that?
Oh no!
Because they did used to keep the identity secret, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, for several generations of boss now that we've known the identity. It's obviously I'm off the Christmas card list at MI6, and
really,
yeah,
I thought you sometimes get invited down, do you know?
No, a lot of people that follow my website think I'm somehow involved in the murky world of whatever goes on in Whitehall.
Right.
That may be due to my fault, really, that I've overdone the explanation of my relationship with the D-Notice system. And it's just any journalist knows the D-Notice system. They go through it, and it's a way of actually allowing scoops, news exclusives to go out, but not compromising really important things like live SAS operations. For example, rescuing hostages in Sierra Leone. You don't want a news exclusive going out on that while the operation is still live, because people's lives are at risk. So that's essentially what the D-Notice system is all about.
And another story that you were involved in, or you found tidbits of information, was again, it's more sleazy, the Max Mosley, who's the Formula One boss, who basically was going to parties with friends.
Yes, and they weren't Tupperware parties either.
No. So tell us about that, Alan.
Well, I don't normally sully myself with
tabloidy,
sleazy. Yes, I rise above it. But on this occasion, I thought I'd dabble a little bit. So I entered the murky world of
tabloid journalism.
What is the plural of dominatrix? Is it dominatrices?
Pass.
Perhaps we could have a quiz on that. But I provided key research, obviously not the main story, but I provided a certain nuance to the story that revealed the person behind the website who...
So tell us the story from the beginning then, just quickly, not that we want to dwell on this for too long.
I realised that one particular document that I found on the mistress's website...
So this was a mistress,
Abby,
allegedly, of Max Mosley.
Well, she was just
Can we say that?
No, she wasn't a mistress of Max Mosley. I can hear the lawyers in the background.
Okay.
She was a party hostess, shall we say.
Party hostess. And he attended the parties?
The particular party,
the party. But he wanted a tale. He hired a private detective or firm of private detectives
that's
to find out who was spilling information. And it turned out that this woman's husband was actually an MI5 agent.
Yeah, and that, of course all the conspiracy theorists went into overdrive then, thinking that it was a set-up job. But in fact, it was purely, I think they'd run into financial difficulties, and he'd been naughty and not telling his bosses about
the
his wife.
The MI5 agent had been naughty in that the MI5 didn't know that his wife was
precisely
advertising her services, etc. So what happened to... And the MI5 agent, he realised he'd been followed because of his counter-terrorism training or whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
And then he alerted...
Well, he found himself being tailed by this mystery vehicle. And
which was Mosley's employee.
It was Mosley's private detective. Yeah.
Yes. And then he alerted the anti-terror squad or something?
Obviously, the MI5 officer would have alerted his bosses back at Thames House and said, we've got a problem, I'm being followed.
Yeah.
So they... obviously found the vehicle details and phoned them up, and it was this private detective agency.
Yeah.
And they said, why on earth are you following this vehicle? And he said, this is why. And then the whole story exploded then.
Right. And didn't Mosley sue, not because he was at the party, but because of what he was wearing at the party? They got that wrong or something? Did they say that he was dressed as a Nazi or something like that?
Yeah, it was the specific...
So he didn't deny
Nazi overtones.
Right. Okay. The mind boggles.
Well, I mean, my small involvement in that story was that I provided key forensic internet research for a particular aspect of the story, and that I found the person's name who designed the mistress's website by certain magical means. But I thought I'd actually found the name of the MI5 officer who was married to the one. I mean, that would have been massively explosive, that story, but it turned out to be just an associate, a friend, who happened to be a film director based in London.
Okay.
So.
Okay, and what about the future, Alan? How do you see your website panning out? Have you got any plans, or what are your objectives for that?
I feel as though I've been on a bit of an incredible journey with the website. Started off quite humble beginnings. I've managed to hone my research skills, talents, whatever you want to call it. And I've got to the stage now where, as I've described earlier, that I've been responsible for several major research exclusives that have resulted in front page sort of splashes in the Sunday papers. I'd like to expand on that and actually treat. Obviously, I'll continue doing the website from an entertainment point of view and a technical, almost educational point of view. But I want to actually use the skills that I've developed over all these years since 2003. I've achieved all these results in the recent years. I want to develop that further and carry on in the world of investigative journalism. I've ended up attending drinks receptions in Whitehall to do with the D-Notice Committee, where I've met not one but two Directors General of MI5 itself.
Okay. And can you remember who they were?
Yes. I mean, it was a bizarre situation. I met Dame Eliza Manningham-Buller.
Yeah.
I mean, that was...
Well, she's written a few books now, hasn't she? About
No, that was Stella Remington.
Yes, Stella Remington. Have you met Stella Remington?
No.
No, you haven't. Right, okay.
But I mean, the bizarre spectacle of being introduced to Dame Eliza Manningham-Buller, it was a bit like, I guess, Danny LaRue being introduced to the Queen at the London Palladium. I mean, admittedly...
Don't put yourself down, Alan.
Well, with hindsight, it was a mistake me launching into a couple of verses of Mother Kelly's Doorstep. But,
right.
I'd had a few, you know.
Right, okay. Right, and do you think that the heads of MI5 and MI6 are informed of everything, or do you think you're aware of the phrase "the need to know," where people the information is compartmentalised? Do you think that the heads of MI5 and MI6 are like the Prime Minister, just figureheads and don't have detailed knowledge of the comparted projects going on, or do you think they oversee it all? What do you think?
Now you're straying into the land of New World Order and
yeah, well,
yeah.
You don't want to answer that question then?
No, I have an opinion on. I think we don't need to worry about the New World Order. It's the old world order that always has been and always will be the problem. In that a few select elite at the top of society control everything that goes on.
And do you think there's a secret society influence over the intelligence agencies?
It always used to be. I remember being at school and being told that you could not rise above a certain rank in the police force without being a Freemason or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is actually insulting to a lot of hard-working people who pass all the inspectors' exams, etc., and achieve promotion. The legitimate route.
This is probably where you and I would part company, and you know we could.
I certainly agree that it oils a lot of cogs, doesn't it? Being a member of a certain fraternity. But I would guess that more secret deals are done on the golf course than at the Grand Lodge.
Okay. All right, and Alan, is there anything else you want to add?
Well, I'd just like to say that it's very kind of you to invite me on this programme, because I'm not your normal sort of guest. Am I really?
Well,
I've not got any UFO stories to tell you. I mean, I've had a few, not so much out-of-body experiences, but I've had lots of out-of-head experiences.
Right. Is that alcohol-induced, or...?
Probably, yes.
Right. Okay, then, Alan. Well, we'll get you beamed back down to planet Earth, and thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, and it just remains for me to say, keep your eyes on the skies and your feet on the ground, and tell all your friends about this show.
The Richplanet Starship is sponsored by Geared4.com online bikes, clothing and accessories.